So you stated the key differences between veganism and vegetarianism. So one, I think the major would center on, for from an Indian perspective, would be on a cow and taking milk and other cow products. Are there any other places where maybe you could list what you feel are the major differences between veganism and vegetarianism as was traditionally practiced in India with a spiritual understanding? Or we could say the bhakti perspective and veganism, which are the major separating, diverging points?
Actually, I think veganism is a philosophy that objects strongly to the usage of any animal products of an animal origin, because they believe that fundamentally doing so involves exploitation and cruelty. So from what I understand, this is the core or the essence of the philosophy of veganism. And therefore, they avoid eating meat, fish, etc., eggs. And in that, we are totally with them. So this is where we agree heartily with them, that we don't eat fish, meat, eggs, etc. But they go a couple of steps further, because they say it's not only in respect of food, but also in respects of clothes and respects of personal artifacts and belongings and anything of human use, should be avoided if it is of animal origin. So basically, what does that mean? The first thing, apart from meat, fish, and eggs, that the vegans avoid is milk and milk derivatives. So that's butter, yogurt, cheese, lassi, and so on and so forth. And that's something that is so deeply steeped in Indian cuisine and Indian culture and Indian philosophy, Indian spirituality even, that is hard to accept this as a principle. But we'll come to the point of where we understand where they're coming from. It's because of the cruelty involved in extracting milk nowadays. So we agree with them over there, but not with the fundamental principle that because it's an animal product, it's necessarily a source of a cause of exploitation and cruelty. If indeed there is cruelty and exploitation in drawing milk from the cow, then we don't want that. So we agree with them on that point. But traditionally in India, for so many millennia, the cows were looked after, very lovingly with great devotion. Lord Krishna set the standard in Vrindavan as the original transcendental cowherd boy. So anyway, that's the first point where vegans, where we differ from vegans, because they don't eat milk and milk derivatives. Second thing is honey.
Yes.
We take honey, they don't take honey. Again, there's a similar principle there, because they feel that extracting honey involves cruelty and exploitation of the bees. In as much as milk is important for us civilizationally, spiritually, culturally, honey is also important. If you look at our deity worship, the Panchamrita Abhishek, the 5 nectars with which we bathe the deities, right? We have, of course, milk, we have yogurt, and we have ghee. And then we have sugar water, and we have honey. Honey is one of the 5 items with which the deities are bathed at the time of the Abhishek ceremony. Honey is offered, I think it's in Hari Bhakti Vilas or somewhere, I can't cite the exact reference now, but Sanatana Goswami mentions that if you offer honey to the lotus feet of the Lord, the Lord is very pleased, and far greater than so many thousands of Rajasuya Yagyas or something like that. So you also have honey in the Madhuparka, which is offered to the Lord. So in various types of worship and even in receiving guests, honey was very much used in our spiritual and religious practices. And even in Ayurveda, it is such an important means of therapy. Is used for its medicinal value as a standalone medicinal item, apart from sometimes acting as a vehicle for other medicines, because it's sweet. So if you want to take a bitter medicine or something, then you can use honey, or in combination with that bitter medicine, perhaps it's more effective. So from the point of view of worship, from the point of view of Ayurveda, even the yogis, they had milk and honey. Even today, you say it's a land of milk and honey, right? When you want to say that everything is in abundance. And milk and honey are two of the best sattvic foods according to Vedic philosophy, in principle. So even though the honey comes from bees and so on, and but still somehow it's sattvic, because food is considered sattvic according to the kind of effect that it has on the one who consumes it. It's known as sattvic or rajasic or tamasic, in the mode of goodness or passion and ignorance, according to the kind of qualities and properties it has. So honey has a kind of a property that invokes or in the sense of a mode of goodness in people.
Yeah.
So honey is the second part, right? So there's milk, there's honey. As far as food items, I think, as far as I can see, these are the only two main differences. And perhaps some other things like, gelatin capsules and other things which have animal products,
Yeah, I think wool might also be a concern. Woolen clothes.
Yes.
Even if you go to clothing, it's quite a bit. Other things
Yes.
coming. Yeah.
Absolutely. Wool and silk.
Silk, yeah. And
wool and silk. These are also two interesting items that vegans don't use, whereas we have a different take on that. From the perspective.
So now I have been thinking about this, that at one level, at a intuitive moral level, it does seem right. Animals are not for our use. If we don't approach it from a perspective of a particular culture, but animals are not for our use. In fact, the word use itself jars a thoughtful human being. No other human being is meant to be used by any other human being, and no other living being is meant to be used. However, while we agree with that, we don't want to use other living beings, but nature itself doesn't exist in isolated compartments. Now, there is interaction, and we see that there are various modes of relationships in the natural world itself. There is, of course, predators and prey, but then there are symbiotic relationships. So there are various modes, and we cannot isolate humanity from the rest of nature. One way we try to isolate it, so we could, if we consider a pendulum, in some ways we had isolated humanity. At one extreme is we are above all of nature and we will dominate nature. So now maybe the pendulum has swung to the other way in veganism, and it says, that we are separate from nature and we won't take anything, specifically here from the animal world. So you have become muted somehow.
I don't know what happened. It suddenly went off.
But I think it's overall that it's continuing recording.
Okay.
So So from a rational or a moral perspective, without, if we start with, whenever I try to speak with new people, I try to approach with a minimalist assumption approach. That means if somebody doesn't have to assume that this thing is right or this thing is right or this thing is right. So if, say, I don't consider cows to be sacred, but still, or I don't consider milk to be special as compared to other products. So from a rational perspective, or even from a moral, something which feels right. So one approach I thought is that nature exhibits multiple relationships within each other, within various living beings, and we humans could also have multiple modes of interaction. So certainly we don't want domination and exploitation of the animal world, but just taking some animal products, does that necessarily lead to exploitation? So yeah, any thoughts about that?
This is precisely the point. I think that the vegans are going too far.
Yes.
I mean, up to a point, we are right there with them, totally in tune with them. But beyond the point, then I feel they go too far. And I think you said it very nicely that it's not one or the other. It's not that you have a feeling of exploiting everything, and that if you don't want to exploit, then you can't use anything. That is impossible. Instead of using, I would say there is harmonious interdependence.
Yes.
No species, no race, no individual can exist independently in this world. Right? We are dependent on a million other categories, animate and inanimate. We are dependent on the bacteria and the soil, without which we wouldn't have any crops. No plants would grow if it wasn't for the microbes in the soil. If it wasn't for the microbes and bacteria in our gut, in our intestines, we wouldn't be able to digest the food. And so many crucial functions are performed by little insects, by germs, by birds who pollinate, the bees who also help in pollination. So it's all one very complex, inconceivable networking of harmonious interdependence. No one can say that I will not use anything else. Then you won't be able to survive. But what we do say is that don't be cruel. Don't exploit. You cannot live without using something, quote unquote, but use it according to certain criteria. So I would list out the following criteria that we would keep in mind to regulate this principle of using something from our environment. Okay? What would be the guiding factors that would dictate whether and to what degree we can use something from nature, whether it's an animal product or not, whether it's a vegetable product or not? I mean, for the matter, it's not just that we have, there are problems with animal products, there are problems with plant products as well. We could indiscriminately cut trees, we could do so many other things and exploit plant resources as well. So I would say that whether it's plant-based or animal-based or animate or inanimate, the following criteria can be kept in mind to guide our decisions on what we can use for our benefit and to what degree. Number one, I would say that that particular use should be recommended in our scriptures, or at least permitted, or at the very least not prohibited in the scriptures. First point. If that first point is okay, if that's fulfilled, then we go to the next that we should not use it with cruelty. We should not inflict pain and cruelty upon whatever it is. It may be a tree, a plant, an animal, or an insect, whatever it may be. Even a mountain, a river, anything. So that's second. The third, and by the way, we can be cruel to inanimate things also, even though they can't perhaps feel like we do. But by cruelty, I mean a form of exploitation and unjust assault, on other entities. So that's the second point, which is that there must be no cruelty and inflicting of pain and unnecessary assault on the category which we propose to use. The third, not only should there be no cruelty and pain inflicted on that category, in fact, we must have love and devotion to it. We must love everything in nature. Of course, our understanding is, and I'll come to this a little later at the end, but if you love Krishna, you love everything else. Okay? But still, we must love everything that we do. So we love the cows. When you love the cows, you serve them with love and devotion as Krishna did in Vrindavan, then you can't be cruel to them. If you are cruel to the cows, it means that you haven't understood what Krishna's system was. You haven't got this point right, that these cows are not to be exploited and not to be cruelly treated. So we must offer with love and devotion. We serve them. And even if they're, let's say, bees, now you can't love a bee like you can love a cow, right? In a cow, you can actually have a reciprocal relationship. You love and stroke the cow licks you, and there is a very tangible reciprocal relationship of love that is perceived. But with a bee, you can't have that. But you can still do it in a way that in your heart there is an understanding that this bee is also an agent of Krishna. And we can also deal with the bee in a way that doesn't cause it pain, that doesn't deprive it of its nutrients, of its life, and so on. So there is a kind of an inner feeling of compassion, of love. So that's the third point, love. I would say the fourth point would be that whatever we use, we should use in moderation. So that's about the quantity. Because even if you have a sattvic food, let's say milk, but if you drink too much milk, you're going to have a problem. So you can't justify excessive consumption of milk on the grounds that it is sattvic. So sattvic not only identifies certain kinds of foodstuffs, but it also indicates that these things must be light, easy to digest, and therefore must be partaken of in moderation only, not in excessive quantity. So therefore, that's the fourth point, that it should be done in moderation. And finally, I would say, after all these things are done, then it should be offered to Lord Krishna with love before we use it. So whether it's milk, or it's honey, or it's food grains, or it is a new cloth that we have got, we will, in fact, the Shastras even talk of medicine. We have to all offer it to Krishna with love and then consume it as prasadam. So I would say these are the 5 criteria on the basis of which we can utilize what Krishna or God has provided to us in the environment. If we have these 5 guiding principles or these 5 criteria in mind, then I don't think that it is wrong in any way to utilize things from the environment.
That's beautiful. This is very well thought out. I'll repeat this. Scripturally authorized, cruelty-free, with loving attitude, then
In
in
moderation.
moderation, and then offered to Krishna.
Yes, yes.
Okay. That's now.
All five have to be there.
Yes, that's true. So, with respect to the second point of cruelty-free, say there is a traditional argument that cows give more milk than what their cows need. And in that sense, cows have been designed by nature to provide milk to humans. Now, the counter argument that, say, the vegans have is that we don't see that in nature. Quite often, you have to restrain and deprive the calf. And only then you can get the milk for humans. And also that when we as humans, when we grow up and we take milk, other species, most species take milk during their weaning phase, when they're in infancy. But we don't. But only humans take milk later on. So beyond that, we can address the specifics. But beyond that, there is this basic principle that whatever is done in nature, that is the way we should be doing things. So that premise itself is everything natural. By natural means, how is it is done in nature? Is everything natural the way humans should be doing it? Just because natural, that doesn't necessarily make it desirable or necessary and mandatory for us. So could you comment on these two perspectives about it?
I'll come to the second one first. You know, what we can use from nature, what we can't, etc., is not up to us to freely decide independently. That's one of the 5 criteria. The first one was it must be scripturally authorized.
Okay.
So what is meant for a human being and what is not meant for a human being? What is nature's arrangement for the human being? What's nature's arrangement for the tiger or for the bee? Is not something I can simply decide on my own. I have to see the larger scheme of things as ordained by the supreme authority. Now, the problem comes in when environmental activism comes devoid of God consciousness. So you have Mother Nature, but you don't have Father God. So you try to struggle to protect Mother Nature, which is noble, which is good. But unless you do it under the guidance of Father God, you know, you will have a problem. You know, because your environmental activism and your protection of the environment will be incomplete. So whether a human being should drink milk in adulthood or not, considering that all other species drink milk only in their infancy, in their childhood, and only humans are the ones who drink later. Now, is that natural for humans or not? Who decides? So we have the Shastra. And the Shastra describes the cow's milk as being one of the most sattvic foods that are best for developing the health, the physical health of the body for humans, and also for developing the finer tissues of the brain, as Srila Prabhupada puts it, and to develop a kind of a spiritual inclination to live a happy and wise life. So therefore, decisions about these things must be seen with reference to God's plan for us in this world. And therefore, when you divorce God from your picture of the environmental protection, all conundrums come up. So if you bring in a plan for us and we accept that this is how it is, then things become much simpler. So coming to the first point, I think about the calf, right? The cruelty when the
Yeah.
calf is deprived of its rightful share of
1 minute before if I can just respond to this point a little bit. See, as soon as we start talking about God and God's plan, at least today's mind takes it as, it's your religion, your God's interpretation of things. So quite often people have to take certain leaps of faith to accept that this is God's plan for humanity, because even within religions we see that not all religions mandate or stress vegetarianism with equal emphasis. So this of course could lead us to a separate discussion in future about, could we arrive at a universal basic understanding of what being spiritual or being God centered could mean. But at this stage, when we talk about the plan that God has, that what all can be taken from nature and what all can be not taken from nature, we could, if we just approach it from a rational perspective, then we could say that there are so many things in human society that we don't do, that we humans wear clothes, and that's a sign of human culture. Now in humans we have pair bonding in the form of marriages, and in some ways it's essential because the human offspring requires far more care than any other species. So other species, the offspring can just, for example, birds that have or egg fish and fish babies, they might just be able to live on their own right from the beginning. So there are significant differences between human society and the animal world, and many of these have actually ensured the survival and the flourishing of human society. So is it, even if I don't bring in a religious angle to it, even I think from a rational perspective, we could make a case that the animal world and how things are done in the animal world need not be a benchmark or model for how human society has to function.
Yeah, good point. You know what I would say in this regard? I would think it will be a good idea to introduce the concept of the three modes of material nature.
Okay.
And tell them how we are all guided and governed by these three modes. And they make us act and think differently. And why it is important for us to be governed by a particular mode, let's say the mode of goodness. And what are the characteristics and consequences of being in the mode of goodness? And similarly for the mode of passion and ignorance. If that is presented in a very scientific, in a rational, in a logical manner, it is there for everyone to see. If one gives sufficient examples, etc., from the world around us, then people will get it. And then we say, okay, so now let's examine different foodstuffs from the point of view of the kind of effects they have on people. So let's talk about foodstuffs. So even if you bring them to Bhagavad Gita, but tell them, okay, even if you don't accept Krishna as God, at least accept some of these principles here. Your theological beliefs will come to later, Once they develop faith in the three modes of material nature and many other things that are mentioned there, they will slowly start developing faith that, yeah, the person who's speaking this must be really great, because he's speaking something that's so rational and so wonderful. then they will develop faith in Krishna automatically. So then we talk about the effects that drinking milk can have. By milk, I mean not the modern milk from the industrial farming, dairy farming, but the original pure milk, where the calf got its share and everything else, cruelty-free. Then they will understand that, yes, it's meant for us. That's number one. Number two, we can talk of history in terms of traditions. You look at all the great yogis and renunciants and others who lived on very frugal diets. Many of them lived in isolation in the forests or in the hills, and they ate roots and berries and fruits. And there were some who lived exclusively even on milk, right? And they managed to sustain their bodies and remain very healthy throughout their life just by drinking milk. And because of that, they had such a pure consciousness. And because of that, they were then able to pursue their spiritual activities properly. So even if people don't believe in the concept of a personal God, if they think that's a sectarian idea, etc., at least they can understand logically the concept of the three modes of nature. And they can also understand that there is something spiritual, there is a spiritual process, there is a world of spirituality. And there is a group of people in history who have traditionally been following this kind of life. What are the kinds of foods they ate? Yes, just look at that. So in this way, I think we can bring to their notice reasonable.
That's beautiful. So there is a what is called as metaphysical or philosophical spirituality, and there is also pragmatic or functional spirituality. And pragmatic spirituality is where, if at an empirical level the benefits of certain spiritual practices are explained, then that can be adopted, even if I still don't accept or have some reservations about the metaphysical claims of that particular worldview or that particular spirituality. So I find that the empirical spirituality can act as a good bridge, so that people don't have to take a leap of faith. They have a bridge by which they can walk across toward that faith. So it's so three modes is a fascinating topic, and maybe we could discuss it again in future of what it means. But yes, in terms of three modes as well as traditional.
What's happening is there's some internet issue.
Oh. Okay, now
is it at your end or my end? Is my internet weak or your internet?
Oh, okay. But has it stopped now, or is it still there?
I lost you for a few seconds.
Am I back?
Now you're back to, I can see you again now.
Okay.
Okay, so if I understood you right, you think that there are two approaches. One is the metaphysical, theological approach, and the other is one that gives a pragmatic presentation of the philosophy and theology in such a way that is empirically verifiable. Yes, that's the approach I'm speaking of as a second option. But in doing so, you also present a model.
Yes.
It's very much a part of the philosophy, like the three modes of material nature, the whole concept of it. You know, so it will make them realize that what we're saying is really quite reasonable.
That's true.
Right?
That's true, yes. Yes,
you had also mentioned the first point was about the calf not getting the milk.
Yes, that's true.
And that's something that's at the heart of the whole problem. You know, Um, and I agree with the vegans here, because today the industrial dairy farming um, has become so full of cruelty. The less said, the better. It's unspeakable, the things that they do. So I would say that the criteria for us to accept milk should be as follows, and these were all followed in the earlier days in India and other places as well, most places at least. Um, the first and most important criterion is, at the very minimum, don't kill the cows and the bulls and the calves.
Okay.
Okay, at the very least. Second, look after the cows and bulls with love and devotion. Okay. Third, don't feed or inject into the cows or the bulls various types of chemical substances and hormones and what else, unnecessary antibiotics and so on, just to boost your production of milk. It is very harmful to the cows and the calves. Fourth, do not confine them to the stalls all day and all night long. Let them graze freely in the pasture lands, in the forest, or at least in some courtyards, and they should have access to grazing land as far as possible. But let them not be exclusively confined, because that's also a form of cruelty. The next point would be very, very important point. Don't separate the calf and the mother.
Okay.
And the cow becomes very joyful when the calf is with her, and the calf feels very sheltered and protected when it's with the mother. And so the cow gives milk profusely when she's in a cheerful mood. The other day I was hearing Srila Prabhupada's lecture, and he was saying that you want to artificially extract milk from the cow by injecting and by doing so many other nasty things. But if you just keep the cow happy and joyful, out of sheer pleasure, the cow will give abundant milk. There will not be any shortage. So when the mother cow is with her calf, she feels so happy. And if she's overall well looked after by the cowherds, with care, with devotion, and they're allowed to graze, they're fed properly, etc., then they will give ample milk. And the first right of the milk, or to consume the milk, is with the calf. So the calf should get its rightful share of milk from the mother, and the calf should be allowed to drink to its full satisfaction, even if it means that as a result of that, we as humans get a little less milk. So when the whole focus is on trying to extract as much milk as possible from the cow, when you look at the cow as a milk machine, then naturally cruelty comes in. But if you understand that the first right to the milk of the cow is given to the calf, then the excess milk can be taken by humans. And that is a fair thing for humans to do. So there are other things also in terms of cruelty, like, nowadays they have these artificial milking machines which cause a lot of pain, and very often the pus and blood also comes into the milk from the udders, and they're practically on to be kept on the udders almost all day long, 24 hours if I'm not mistaken in some cases. So in this way, there are any number of cruel practices which they perform. I've just given a sample. But at least these principles must be followed very strictly. Then we can say that this kind of milk is totally acceptable. And if these criteria are fulfilled, then I believe that if the vegans still have objections to drinking milk, then that is not very reasonable.
So now, if there are three different situations, say if somebody has the option to take ahimsa milk nearby, then it may be more expensive and they have to, that's worth the cost still. That's one option where we get cruelty-free milk, ahimsa milk. The other is that we don't get that milk, so we take the normal milk and maybe we pray and offer it to Krishna and then take it. Or the third is that we abstain from milk. So now among these three, say if the third option is there, then naturally that would be the recommended one, even if it is more expensive. But there are places where the third is not available at all. So I have been asked this question that then in that situation, what do we do? Because at least for our temples, if there's no farm nearby, we need, for the deities, we need milk for the various worship, forms of worship, and for offering the bhoga to the Lord. So among these two, which one to choose at an individual level, not at an institutional level? So my answer usually is that, you know, in spiritual life, there are principles and there are preferences. So that with respect to this particular area, some devotees, if they don't get ahimsa free milk, they may feel that, yes, this is a part of our culture, so let me take whatever is available, let me offer it to Krishna, and through this, because I'm offering it to Krishna, at least that cow will be benefited by it. And it's not that my not drinking milk, its slaughter is not necessarily going to stop. So that could be one way of looking at it. Take it and spiritualize it at whatever level I can. And the other is, no, I don't want to be any part of it. I don't have any part of it. So if we don't have ahimsa milk, then for functional purposes in that situation, we become like vegans. So what would be your thoughts on this situation?
Yeah, this is a question I think we all get asked, yeah, everywhere. Obviously, as you said, if ahimsa milk is available, that is definitely the first choice. Sometimes, even when ahimsa milk is available, some devotees feel they can't afford it. I would think that they should cut corners somewhere, but maybe cut down the consumption of something else, but take this. Now, where ahimsa milk is not available, you have the two choices. Either to buy the regular supermarket milk available outside, or to abstain from it altogether, and as you said, functionally, for all functional purposes, be like a vegan. Now, my personal, what I feel is it is up to devotees to make their choice. There are two schools of thought amongst the devotee, in the devotee community. One prefers one option, the other says the other. Personally, I would fall in the group where I abstain from if it is not ahimsa milk. I avoid milk unless I'm fairly sure that the milk is coming from a place where there is no cruelty. Of course, it's really difficult to 100% know in some cases, but certainly in some places you can have an idea that yes, it is fairly ahimsa, the calf gets its share of the milk and so on. So in such places, I take milk. So then I'm not a vegan, but if such milk is not available, then I abstain. That's my personal preference.
Yes, I also try to do the same thing in general. Then what about for the temple? We'll have to go on with whatever is available, isn't it?
I would say let the temples feel inspired to set up farm projects where they can look after the cows nicely and they can produce their own milk according to our principles.
Mm.
It's a challenge in so many respects. But Srila Prabhupada really wanted our temples to have farms. So if we do that, then probably temples will have such milk being available to them, especially for the deities and so on, and for the devotees.
That's true.
So I think this is an area that's a little tricky.
Yeah.
Not for me, but in the sense that for me, I'm clear about it. But many devotees are caught between the two options. So I can just tell them, look, this is what I do. Now you choose what you would like to do.
That's true.